Well, good morning. I think everything should be working according to plan, so hopefully this goes off without a hitch. It's going to be interesting. So got a lot of info to get through today, so thank y'all so much for joining. Today is going to be basically our first one of these. It's called Community Matters, and so we'll probably continue to have a few more presentations like this that are a little bit more focused on more of the stewardship and conservation that surrounds what we do as a fly fishing community, and as well as just kind of the resources that we have that we can help steward and even positively sow back into as a fly fishing community and as anglers. So give a few moments for everybody to jump on here. And for those of you that don't know, today we're going to be dealing with wastewater treatment. So that's going to be it's a lengthy topic and one that I regrettably know too much about. It's something that I wish I didn't know a whole lot about this at all. The issue is I've had to deal with it a lot. And so I think many of you, if you followed along with the shop, are aware that we have had a lot of sewage treatment issues in the greater Austin area. We've had a lot on Brushy Creek specifically, kind of east of town, being kind of the ground zero, if you will, of a lot of the fight that took place several years ago, that thankfully we have a positive ending to that story. So I've got a whole couple of pages of notes today to go through, because this one with facts and figures, if it's just talking about fishing, I can do that off the top of my head, but we're talking about facts and figures and numbers. I mean, there's only so much of that I can dedicate to memory. So between running a fly shop and I got my book finished up and all that sort of good stuff. So between all that, the brain space is a little limited, especially this close to Trout Fest for those of you that are watching. While we're waiting for a few more folks to jump on, just a quick announcement. If you have been waiting, and we have talked about this, we are very excited to announce the arrival of the Texas Taper. So this is actually a fly line that I designed with Scientific Anglers. So I was able to design the taper, grain weights, taper lengths, all that sort of good stuff, head lengths. All that's in there, and it's a very special line. It's actually a hybrid fresh and saltwater line where we blended two coatings to actually make the coating that's on this line. So it's actually kind of the first of its kind that actually blends those two in a custom line. And this line is only available through Living Waters Fly Fishing, which is also pretty cool. If you would like one of these, we have these available to test cast here at the store. We got a whole fleet of reels. They come in 2 through 8 weight. So if you'd like to come by the shop and test cast it, go for it. If you need us to ship you one, we can do that. We know how the mail works. Fun fact on the back of the box, I mean, I designed the line so you get to kind of actually put what's on the box. We actually put a little Rio Grande cichlid right there saying that the line's good for cichlids. So the only Scientific Angler line in existence, probably the only line anywhere that will ever feature a cichlid on the back of the box. So that is very exciting news. We'll actually have a new product update hopefully coming out pretty soon with all the new stuff that we've added to the shop at the beginning of the year. So we'll have that hopefully right after Trout Fest. We'll try to make some announcement like that. Well, we got enough folks on here. Let's go ahead and get started. Wastewater treatment. It is something that everybody's going to have to deal with, and I want to be very careful how I present this today, just in a number of ways. One, it's the inevitable. If you live in a house and you take showers and you wash dishes and you flush toilets, you're going to have water that goes down a drain. It's just, there's no two ways about it. You're going to have wastewater. There's just no other option out there for us that live in suburbia USA. The thing that really we run into is that water then goes out of your house into sewers. Those interceptor lines are the big lines that run throughout a city or a township and head back to some form of wastewater treatment plant. And I do want to preface this. I'm sorry, I have multiple screens all around me. I'll try to do my best to kind of look over here too. If anybody has any questions in the chat, you can drop those in there. I do have the ability to see that, so we can answer some questions live if anybody has any. And then of course, as this thing gets posted, I can try to answer comments as best as I can as well. But I do want to open that up if anybody has any questions throughout this, because there's going to be a lot of information, and I'll do my very best to try to keep tabs on that. So if you see me looking this way, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm up to date on questions and such. But as they move through interceptor lines, you're going to see them go into a wastewater treatment plant, and there's typically a lift station that pulls that water up into the plant for processing. And so with wastewater treatment plants, if you ever want to go see how those work, there's a bajillion videos about it, and there's a lot of step-by-step, little schematics that show you basically the water gets screened and, it filters out any sort of other like solid waste or products that's in it that are large. You can, feminine hygiene products, anything like that. Some of that stuff gets filtered out, so you basically have those screens that all that gets screened out in initial. The water then goes through, settling processes, filtration processes, aeration processes, even bacterial treatments. There's a lot that takes place within a wastewater treatment plant. And that's a good thing for us because that water is eventually going to be returned in one of two ways. You'll either see water reuse, where they'll take it in water parks, golf courses, sports fields, things like that. That will often happen. You will also see water reuse, throughout, different municipality, features and stuff like that, where even some like city properties and things will use that. The other option is to return it back to a, flowing water body or some water source of some type. For the most part in Texas, you're going to be seeing that going into creeks and rivers. And a lot of people, that really kind of turns their stomach, and they're just like, oh no, I can't have wastewater in my river and things like that. And there are, wild and pristine and natural rivers that don't have that. But thankfully, most of those rivers are more rural, and they're going to be, very remote and things like that. So, the Devil's River would be a perfect example. That's just all spring feed. There's no man-made componentry where that, sewage is feeding into that to contribute to water flow. However, the San Gabriel, Brushy Creek, the Lampasas, there's a lot of, in the Lampasas, maybe not in the Lampasas proper as in many places, but a lot of the tributaries and things like that. You're going to have, effluent that enters that waterway at some point, and then, it will, meet up with larger water bodies moving downstream. Very, very common practice. It happens all throughout the country. The bigger issue is when it is done poorly. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk today is the pros and cons and all that sort of stuff. So just to give you a little bit of background, and the reason that I have kind of made this a topic of discussion, I've had multiple people call me recently, very recently as a matter of fact, regarding the San Gabriel River. There was a recent sewage spill just north of us on Berry Creek, for those of you that don't know. And we'll talk about some of those failures in just a moment. But what really brought this to light and really where the shop got involved was Brushy Creek, the home water. And just to give you an idea, Brushy Creek is 69 miles long, but we're just going to take kind of the portion that we fish most regularly, and that's really from about Hutto up. So really, if we were to look at it even then, Hutto's really great. It fishes fantastic, but the bulk of what we really do in Round Rock, obviously, it kind of ends, right there. The water will get a little bit deeper in some spots as you go east, but really right around that County Road 123, or a little bit east of Redbud Lane, which is right there kind of near the Dell Diamond. So if you're familiar with that area, there is a large regional wastewater plant right there across the street from the Dell Diamond, and that's the one that services Round Rock, the bulk of Round Rock's water. It also does Cedar Park, Leander, and some of North Austin, where it's actually a multi-city conglomerate where basically those cities all have at least a portion, not all, but a portion of their wastewater headed to that plant for treatment. So with that, looking at this, you see this, large plant situated right on Brushy Creek. That can be a really good thing. That can be a really bad thing. So sewage treatment is kind of a best of times, worst of times situation. When it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, it's really bad. There's not a lot of in between. In the isolated events and the spills and things that happen, some of those have longer durations. Some of them are just a one-time, one day, somebody flipped the wrong switch or a valve happened or there was an overflow and something went wrong and there's a fish kill or something of the sort. So we'll talk about what results from that in just a moment. But with Brushy Creek specifically, what happened is, for those of you who remember Ice-Mageddon, the Snowpocalypse, whatever it was, I don't remember which one it was. I think it was Winter Storm Uri, if I remember correctly. It happened, and there was this, the store here, we were shut down for, I think, 4 or 5 days, where the roads were iced over, we kept getting snow, and it was just, Texas infrastructure just doesn't deal with that well. As a result, there was a major failure statewide in many instances on a lot of plants where electricity failed, where power and grids went down, and it was just an absolute debacle for many different I would say just not the plants alone, but just many forms of infrastructure. It was an absolute wasteland. I mean, just that much ice and snow and everything got shut down. The thing that happened with Round Rock's treatment plant is a lot of their, what is actually the sewage flock, when it settles to the bottom of clarifiers, they actually vac it or suck it out of those things. They put it through a press and it extracts most of the water off of it, and they do a couple other treatments and it leaves the plant. They'll either put it, you can use it, and I think Austin actually does like Dillo dirt where they do that and actually have kind of this, it's a really fertile dirt, essentially, kind of a compost type situation that you can put on your garden and things like that. So there's some reuse property to it. And it's all been well treated and aged and all that sort of stuff. So it's broken down and done what it needs to do. But within this, you could put it on, different fields and stuff like that if you were growing stuff. But one of the things, it's more used for, kind of, I won't say agricultural as much as it is kind of just general commercial landscaping and stuff like that. The thing that you'll also have it done is they'll take that stuff and actually throw it in a landfill and it composts and everything goes down. But they ship that stuff off-site at the plant. Well, by not being able to run those trucks for a week because of the ice and the road conditions, that basically piled up, and you had everybody in their homes and they were, using their restrooms and flushing their toilets and taking showers, and nobody was going anywhere because everybody's stuck at their house. It's kind of the perfect storm. You have this major influx of water into the plant. It couldn't handle the amount being received, and in addition to that, it put them over their limit for discharge, and they weren't able to get the actual flocculent matter off-site in a timely fashion. So that was the problem, and it lasted. I think that was one of the problems. I actually think that there's others at play, and I'm not going to put those on here because it's kind of that we cannot confirm or deny. I think there was some other deals with water volume that were a concern prior to the storm, personally. However, the storm exacerbated it, and it never really caught back up. The big issue is reporting, and we didn't see, basically anglers called a lot of these overages and pollution events in, where anglers, homeowners, they were the ones reporting this, where the plants should be, but in many cases, and I find that across the board, that's not unique to this one situation, where the plants just are kind of like, whoops, and they just keep going a lot of times. In this case, we had months of water conditions that were highly out of compliance with any sort of permit. To make a long story short, city council meetings, Texas Parks and Wildlife kills and spills, multiple talks with TCEQ and river authorities and all this sort of stuff. I worked the equivalent of a part-time job fighting this thing for months. And in addition to everything else I got to do. So when it comes to fighting for your home water, you have to take care of it. And so it was one of those things that as a shop, we didn't really have an option. And mind you, it didn't affect the water that we have up here throughout, most of Round Rock. It was really Round Rock and east down into Hutto. So like that, anywhere the Dell Diamond wasn't east is what was affected. Up here, it was, good as could be, fished great. The conditions were great. Water quality was great. You would never know that it literally looked like an open sewer on the other side of town. And so it is one of those things that just because you don't put eyes on it, don't assume that everything looks the same all the way through. There could be an issue, and it's good to every now and then drive your river and drive your creek and check on things. That's how we get things reported and keep people honest. But anyway, multiple year issue, permit overages, and then when there was an issue, there was lack of reporting, lack of signage, and y'all can go back. There's videos on all this stuff, and I would highly encourage you, if you want to see a little bit more about what it was about. Science on the Fly, who we did a lot of water testing with over the years, they actually sent a team down and they produced a video while the height of this event was going on. If you want to see it, I think the picture was posted on Facebook and Instagram, kind of advertising this event, where you see that just brown, sludgy water entering this beautiful, clear water in Brushy Creek. That's what we were up against. So just to give you an idea, that was literally cataclysmic. It was awful. And there was just, it just became something that really was just extraordinarily sad to witness and to see. And that's the part that, we don't want to see any of that happen again. the city finally agreed after multiple meetings and talking with them, and there was a lot of misunderstanding about, fish and the actual result of the actions of the treatment plant and the overages. They thought it was, water pipe leaks and things like that was increasing that higher water load. I would venture to say it probably had something to do with a, near 1,000-room hotel going in right there next to the plant, along with a lot of other urban growth in the area that maybe the plant couldn't handle as much growth that was happening right there in that area specifically. But long story short, with multiple city council meetings and everything like that, we were able to talk with the city of Round Rock, and they agreed to put tertiary filters in, which is basically a final filter on the end of treatment that filters out solids out of the wastewater to prevent an event like this happening ever again at this scale. And it cost them about $20 million to correct it. But there's a lot of things that I'm not going to go harp on or do that, because that's not the whole emphasis of this. The real thing for us as anglers is really making sure that we are good stewards, that we are watchdogs, and that we do make sure that we know what to look for when things are wrong. And that's what I really want to talk today about, is the pros and the cons. So the cons, obviously, when there's failures, it's bad. The perk of water treatment done well is the fact that it provides perennial water to a stream system. So a lot of people are like, sewage treatment bad, and they just immediately, terrible, don't put it in my creek or water. When the Llano River went underground in 2011 in that drought, Brushy Creek was still flowing, because it has 2 upstream plants of Round Rock, and then it has another one east of Round Rock, actually 2 east of Round Rock, that you look at that contribute to water flow. The thing that allows that to work is basically if you take a shower and you live in the area, then guess what? It's going back into Brushy Creek. At least it did something profitable. If the water is treated correctly, it is actually a huge benefit to a waterway. For one, you have perennial flow. I mean, think about, okay, you have a fish kill event and maybe you lose, several hundred or several thousand fish. You look at a total drought where the river dries up completely, you lost all your fish, except for isolated spring-fed pools. Those are much higher kill events overall. And so it's like, I'm not trying to put lipstick on a pig here. I'm just looking at the facts. It's one of those things that when you have water, you have fish. If the water is treated well, you have something that is a consistent, year-round, flowing water. And I don't know if y'all have looked at kind of trends and, and water flows lately. We've been in a drought phase for quite a while. And, the Western Hill Country's just been murdered with it. We've not really hurt for water all that much. I mean, yeah, there's times where it gets a little mossy and things get a little low and some stuff gets a little stagnant, but you can find flowing water if you look, and especially if you're closer to those outfalls on these sewer plants, there's flowing water and you don't have that stagnation, and they are really good places to fish that's reliable all summer long. Perfect example of that would be like Brushy Creek in Cedar Park, up just above Brushy Creek Lake. There's a sewage treatment plant, I think it's about 1.5 miles above the lake. Man, that's a great spot to fish in the summer. It's shaded, water's flowing, water's clear, clean, and it looks really, really good. And the fish population's through the roof. It's an amazing spot. It's tight, it's difficult to fish, but it is reliable when a lot of the other spots in the creek that are lower gradient and they're not as channelized, some of that stuff will actually stagnate a little bit and you'll get algae growth. Up there, since it's shaded, you don't have nearly as much sun coming through the canopy to promote that. So that's one of the things to look at, is they can be very advantageous for anglers when the water treatment is done well. Now, in terms of how bad things got, and I do need to mention this. So let's talk about some of the pollutant types. So you have, out of a water treatment plant, if things go wrong, things that they monitor for when the water enters the creek, they're monitoring for ammonia, they're looking for E. coli, they're looking for total suspended solids, which is commonly called TSS, and you're looking at phosphorus, nitrates, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of things that come into play there. The thing that we had with Brushy Creek is, if you look at E. coli, for instance, E. coli, to be within your legal limit, it's supposed to be, so what they do is they take a sample of water, they culture it in a little like petri dish, and you look at what's called most probable number. So MPN is the actual metric there. 399, so just under 400, 399, most probable number. Anything under that, you are technically in compliance with your permit, at least that plant there at Round Rock. At the height of the sewage issue, If you took a water sample at the outfall, it was over, let me get this metric right, over 17,000 mpn at the outfall. That's disgusting. That's something that can make you bad, like bad sick. So, if not worse. So thinking about that, you look at, that's what that was. If you go down to the crossing at 123, they had readings of over 24,000 mpn. It was supposed to be 399 or less. If I remember correctly, I want to say the metric upriver was like 15. So before you even hit the sewage treatment plant, I think it was like in the low double digits. I think it was like 15 or 20. Don't quote me on that because I don't remember right offhand. But the whole thing about this is you've got all this different stuff they test for, but when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong sometimes. And so let's talk about, we've talked a little bit about how the plant works in terms of how it migrates through the plant. What happened in our case is we had clarifiers, so these big round tanks that water settles in, and the clear water that all the solids has settled to the bottom, much like if you had sandy water or dirty water and mixed it up in a cup, you know, if you let it settle, the dirt will eventually settle to the bottom, the clear and clean water's at the top. That's the stuff that you want to enter the waterway without having any of those solid particulates in it. The legal daily average is 15 milligrams a liter. I don't remember if I put all this on here, but at 15 milligrams a liter, it should be roughly, here's the part, and we'll wrestle with permits in a minute, but it legally permits almost 2,700 pounds of solids to enter the creek a day at 15 milligrams a liter, if they were just living at average. Now, lately the plant has fallen well below that, so everything is good. But in the height of our sewage treatment issue, we had readings, I think it was almost 400 milligrams a liter. I think it was 396 if I remember correctly. If you want to look at if you want to do the math on that, and I did this just before the class today, and it's something to kind of look at this. They're allowed legally almost 2,700 pounds a day legally, which I also deem as a very, very terrible thing. But at the height of the incident, if those readings that were taken at 396 lasted for a day, it would have put 71,000 pounds of solids, roughly, into the creek. I know that's a round number, but it's roughly that much. It's 26 times, the reading that they got was 26 times higher than the permitted amount. And so you start thinking about that and doing that, and you start thinking about what that is in tons. I mean, that's over 35 tons a day entering that waterway in solids in a creek that normally flows under 100 CFS, which is cubic foot per second. So that was, and oh, by the way, that would also be with them abiding by the 21.5 million gallon a day permit that they were permitted. Now, here's the funny thing is all these numbers I'm quoting you are based on the numbers back in like 2021, 22. The expansion that's underway right now in Round Rock is to put the plant at 40 million gallons a day because they've expanded the plant. And it's not there yet, but that's what they're going for at the 40 MGD. And the interesting thing about that is a lot of people are like, oh no, well, as the plant has expanded, they've increased different treatments for phosphorus, they've increased different treatments and redundancies and power supplies, and now they're installing tertiary filters. Those filters, by the way, are coming online this summer. So very exciting to see that the differences that were made, but really from the fly fishing community and local homeowners and concerned residents, those differences are now taking shape in the form of filtration that will not allow those solids to enter the water at the rate that they ever have in years past. So sometimes it takes it to get real bad before things get better. In this case, we've done a thing here and the city partnered to make things right. And kudos to Round Rock for making a good decision here and to do the right thing by the creek. And I mean, I feel like it's the least we can do given everything it's gone through in the last several years. And there were fish kills, there were that have been associated with a lot of this. And what happens is, let's talk about permitting. Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, or on Environmental Quality, they are the ones that issue the permit to a sewage treatment plant. And by the way, again, I know this is a lot of information. If anybody's got any questions, don't hesitate to jump in the chat and leave me a comment there. I'll do my best to answer it. But the TCEQ issues the permit to the entity that is discharging wastewater, whether that be a municipality, whether it be some other governing authority. They'll do that. So they issue the permit based on, and I love this because I had to really research this when this was going on. The permits are sanctioned by the EPA. So the EPA goes, hey, you're good. This is the parameters. TCEQ goes, here's your permit based on, recreational usage, receiving water body. I use air quotes there because I really don't think it matters. If you go back and look at all the permits given to different places in the state, they're darn near rubber stamps. It's close. I mean, the permit on the Colorado River, while it's obviously a larger amount of water going into the receiving water body, it's still the same metrics. And so I'm like, that doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. I mean, because that plant down there is doing, I don't remember what they're doing. I've slept since then. But I mean, I think it's double the amount or triple the amount of what Round Rock's doing. I think it's double at the time, but what it's going to be. But anyway, nonetheless, their metrics are the same for the most part. The suspended solids and all of that. And you're looking at Brushy Creek as a much more sensitive resource in many cases, just because of volume of water flow alone. When you're looking in a drought phase, that creek can be flowing in the single digits. Which is good if we have good, very good treated water entering the system. But if it's bad, it exacerbates those effects even more. Where, I jokingly say in water treatment, dilution is the solution. In this case, when you don't have any water to dilute it, what you're putting in there is all that's present. And so that's something to note there. Those permits, I think a lot of times are rubber stamped, and I'm gonna kind of balance this just a little bit. With TCEQ, one of the things that you'll have to look at is if you call in a number, and I'm going to give you this number right now. So if you ever see a issue at all with any sort of polluted waterway or some sort of water entering a river or creek or lake that looks polluted or is disconcerting, or there's something just off, something doesn't smell right, doesn't look right, you call the reporting hotline at 1-800-832-8224. That number gets you in touch directly with TCEQ, and SWCM comes to the scene, and that's the Surface Water Quality Monitoring Team. SWCM is awesome. If you ever see them and they'll let you, give them a hug. They're great people. They are there so fast. I mean, they can get there just lickety split. I'll call it in. They're on scene just almost immediately. They report it, they record it, they do all the metrics, they do everything. And then if there's any sort of problem where they see the plant hasn't reported something, or there's a construction issue or something like that, and there was no report of a spill, they're able to take any sort of disciplinary action against that. Now, that's where my love for TCEQ kind of ends. And I mean, just based on personal experience. SWCM is awesome. Love them. Some of my favorite people. They're wonderful, wonderful folks. They see the issue. It grieves them. They did all the reporting. They run that up the flagpole. And then whatever entity is there, they get one of these. And that's about it. You don't see, when there's corrective action and there's inspections and there's all this, it really doesn't amount to a hill of beans most of the time. And I'm saying that because I've seen it firsthand. It just doesn't seem to make a difference. And a lot of plants are allowed to remain, out of compliance, or, they're trying to correct things, but Rome wasn't built in a day. When you're rebuilding and expanding and modifying plants to try to make things better, you're still dealing with a problem where you can't just shut the water off. You can't do that. It doesn't work. I mean, unless everybody quits using water, and in which case, yeah, you can do that, but that's not going to happen. So it is a hot topic, because you do have some really extraneous circumstances where you can't just cut the valve off and go, no more water in the creek until we get this fixed. It still has to cycle. And so it's a rolling change, which is unfortunately very, very just degrading on the environment in general. But the ultimate goal is to restore it and get it right. So TCEQ enforcement is where they fail. Really, I would say permitting, enforcement, and any sort of disciplinary action is really where I think it fails. When it comes to monitoring and, being on site for any sort of, any sort of situation that is a negative influence on a waterway, Swickham's on the spot. I love them. They're some of my favorite people on the earth. Infrastructure demand. One of the things within sewage treatment that we are going to see in an urban area, which we obviously live in, and you're going to see a lot of that throughout Texas just based on population growth. This is not our problem. This is every town's problem. Infrastructure growth is very hard when you have population growth at the same time. You can't build enough roads, and you can't, and sadly that means you're going to tear down a lot of trees and stuff like that, but we're going to have more runoff, we're going to have, more water usage, we're going to have more homes built, we're going to have all that. And there's a lot of plants, like, for instance, Liberty Hill, that really got caught in the crosshairs on some of that, and Round Rock got caught there. I think every single place in Central Texas, if you're a water manager from a wastewater point of view, you're still probably sweating bullets at night. I mean, it's just one of those things you can't possibly keep up. Round Rock has already expanded the permit once, they've expanded it again, and now they're looking, I think they've got 2 more rounds coming up, and they've already drawn up plans for more plant expansion to stay ahead of it and not let this happen again. They got caught behind the 8 is what happened, and the infrastructure wasn't there for what was taking place. They should have been ahead of it, and they were not. The plant was under construction, but it wasn't timely enough. And so that was one of the things that by getting ahead of this game, that's going to be very important. You can't just, hope that you have enough, processing power and then everything balloons up and your population grows at the rate that it's growing now. You can't stay ahead of it unless you have a plan. And so that is something I would mention is infrastructure growth is essential in the light of population growth. The role of the EPA with this is they basically are kind of the parent organization over all of it that kind of sets those parameters in place that TCEQ kind of abides by. So for me, the whole parameter here is I don't think the EPA is near strict enough on it. I don't think TCEQ enforces it worth a flip. And I think that they're really good at letting you know when there's a problem, but I don't think they do anything about it. And so that's where we come in. And that's where, citizen science, and I mean, you've got all these different water monitoring organizations and teams, Science on the Fly, Texas Stream Team, a lot of great folks out there doing a lot of great things. But that's where we come in as anglers, because guess what? Where we recreate is also where this water goes. And so, perfect example, I think it was last weekend, if I remember correctly. Let me look at the date. Yeah, it was last weekend. Right after class, had a phone call. A customer called in, said, hey, Fishingberry Creek, it smells terrible and looks terrible, and I am downstream of a sewage plant. And I said, send me pictures and report it. So they called TCEQ, everything got reported. Interestingly enough, it got written in the news slightly thereafter. I have to believe that this angler was probably the first one to report it, which is exceptionally sad, because I don't have this on, this is just a hunch, I don't have this for fact, but when I went and talked to Texas Parks and Wildlife Kills and Spills, they reconned a little bit of the reporting dates, and the reporting dates were the date that the angler recorded it. However, when the news write-up came out, it said that the spill actually happened in late January. So something factually doesn't add up. So we've had failures at Round Rock East, we've had failures at Round Rock West, we've had failures in Cedar Park, we've had failures at Leander, and we've had failures at Georgetown, just below San Gabriel Park, and at Berry Creek, just within the last 3 years. I think it's the last 3 to 4 years we've had failures at all those plants. So if you look at this, some of those are chemical failures. For those of you that do not know, there was a spill at just the wastewater treatment plant right below San Gabriel Park. There was a spill there. It resulted in a fish kill. There was a clarifier. They had water. They basically had water get loose. Essentially, had too much chlorine in it. Chlorine into the system, and they had flocculent matter in it as well. So it looked like the flocculent matter actually is what probably killed more fish than the chemical, based on what we've heard and the information that I've got. So all this information, again, I've pulled this from multiple sources and from anecdotal evidence as well. So I'm not going to go put any of my numbers in a court of law at this point, but it's one of those things. This is to the best of our knowledge what happened. The thing that is interesting about it is we did lose what I think it was several hundred fish is what they reported in that. I think the number is vastly higher. I think fish kills, I think a lot of times the fish either die, get eaten, get scavenged. I think there's a lot, or some sink to the bottom. Some of that stuff I do think that you're going to have some stuff that doesn't show up. The one in Cedar Park killed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fish due to some sort of chemical spill. I think it was the plant. Nobody could ever pin it on the plant. They said it was some sort of a flow that came in through the little tributary creek. There was just a couple of dead fish above the outfall. I think those were fish that were trying to escape the chemical that was entering the waterway. Again, just my opinion. That's not what the news will say. That's not what the city's going to say. I just find it very ironic that there were only a couple of fish dead upstream and the bulk of them were dead downstream. That's just, I think a lot of fish were trying to get out of there because the chemical was burning their gills, and at that point it was irreparable damage. But anytime you have some sort of a chemical chlorine spill, we literally found fish that had jumped out of the water onto the bank because they just can't breathe. And so they actually were trying to get air. You'll see them actually try to gasp air when there's a dissolved oxygen crash or anything like that. So that will happen. But these types of spills and events, you need to know what they look like. And so we want to talk about the signs of pollution. Number one, flocculent matter that looks like brown globs or chunks. And you'll see it's almost like a suspended, it kind of looks like it's really weird. It's like a sandy, suspended substance that kind of gathers up. It's not a solid, it's not a liquid, but it's not like mud either. It's actually like kind of almost like lighter than earth, and you can like stir it and it'll cloud up and billow. That's a really good sign that there's a lot of deposited solids in the waterway. That's not a good thing. And so we saw that a lot on Brushy Creek. You can see that a lot in Berry Creek where that happened. Hopefully it flushed with this recent rain. We did have a pretty good little flush. Not that that helps anything downstream, but it clears it out in the meantime. Again, dilution is the solution in this case, is trying to get it gone, increase water volume, and make sure there's not a dissolved oxygen crash. And that exponentially becomes more of a threat in higher water conditions. So just be aware of that. In hotter water conditions where the temperature is hot and that flocculent matter begins to break down and it eats up all the oxygen while it's actually kind of not composting but breaking down in the system and actually getting back to a different matter entirely. What I will say here is flocculent matter is easy. You can see it. It's brown, it's big, or it's kind of this sandy, brown substance that looks like sewage solids. It's not going to look like poop. It's going to look like just kind of brown globs or, dirt. It looks like that a lot, but a lot of times it'll be suspended, not just on the bottom. Number two, phosphorus is a major pollutant, and this is the one that we're dealing with on the South San Gabriel. And I got a bunch of concerned customers about this. That Liberty Hill's been dumping a lot of phosphorus into the South San Gabriel River. There's been community impact write-ups, there's been news reports, there's been all kinds of stuff. I think there's been a court case at this point. There's been all sorts of stuff revolving the Liberty Hill plant and all the woes that it is impacting the South San Gabriel in a way that is not beneficial at all. So currently, and these are memory numbers, so again, don't hold me on this. Currently, I believe the phosphorus number was 0.5. I think they just reduced it to 0.15, but in order for the San Gabriel to not experience a negative algae bloom, I think it has to be 0.01? I think it's 0.01 is what it is, if I remember correctly. It's still, the limit that they're abiding by now is still vastly higher than what is necessary for that river to remain healthy from a phosphorus standpoint. And a lot of this has to do with the river itself, the receiving water body. A lot of it also has to deal with, what is already intrinsically there in that water body. Is it really nutrient rich? Is it not? That can change what a water body can tolerate. In the South San Gabriel's instance, it's very low, it's very clear, it's hard rock bottom, and it's open and sunny. Very, very susceptible to algae bloom. And so phosphorus is something, and nitrates, you'll see that as a huge crescendo. If you see that count go up, you'll see algae blooms, that filamentous algae, kind of that green scummy stuff. You'll see it cover a creek or a river if the phosphorus and nitrate readings are too high. It's no different than getting like fertilizers that kind of leach in off of a golf course in an area. That happens a lot. So the South San Gabriel River, honestly, it's kind of just a bum place to put a plant. The levels that are needed right now to be discharged into the South San Gabriel, the plant's not even capable of. And I don't even think there's a sewage plant capable of it currently. Can it be done? Sure. I believe it can be done. It just takes an exorbitant amount of money that a lot of these municipalities and townships can't pay. So the real question moving forward for all of us is, how much are our rivers worth? And how much are our waterways worth? Can we, as concerned citizens, convince people that it is worth spending the money to not just treat it and get it out there by the permit, but to live under the permit? Because I believe the permits are wrong. I mean, I do not think they're suitable in many ways. And TCEQ can agree with me or disagree with me all that they want. But when I see a creek that is, Brushy Creek, for instance, that largely is, I think the average flow is between 60 and 75 cubic foot a second, given flood and drought averages. You can't put legally 2,700 pounds of solid matter in that creek every day and it not make a difference to the negative. You can't do that. Now, tertiary filtration is going to fix that in many ways, but that's an example of Round Rock going beyond what they're permitted in a good way, where they've built infrastructure that's going to put them well beneath what is allowed. That's what we want people to do, is do the right thing, not just the legal thing. And that's something that I really wish the permits were more stringent and a lot more restrictive on what is available, or what is permitted rather, to go into a receiving water body. E. coli, nitrates, TSS. TSS is that flocculant, or the suspended solids, chemicals, and just anything like chlorine, things like that. So smells. If it doesn't smell right, doesn't look right, you fished a body of water for years, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, it always kind of has that effluent smell, but something's wrong today. If you see dead fish, if you see something wrong, if you see something or smell something, say something. Call those reporting hotlines. So again, those reporting hotlines, TCEQ is 1-800-832-8224. You can find that on that information on their website as well. There's another one I would also encourage you. If you see dead animals, dead fish, anything like that, you need to call Kills and Spills as well from Texas Parks and Wildlife. Very good friends of mine work in that division, and that is 512-389-4848. So 512-389-4848. Call that number. Those two numbers are great reporting numbers that gets the ball rolling to help keep our plants honest and help keep our fish alive. So if you're reporting a spill, what do you need to know? And that's something that a lot of people don't know. What do you need to know? If possible, make a note or report the following. And so I'm going to flip pages here. Location of the spill, the date, and the time. Those are pretty easy questions to answer. Water color, clarity, and any odor. So pay attention to those things. Make sure that when you see that, you're looking for those things. And those are really easy questions to answer over the phone when you report this. I've called in a number of times and reported stuff. So these are the things that you're going to get asked. Number, size, and species of any organisms affected. Do you see a dead animal? How big is the fish? Are there big fish, little fish? Is it a certain size class? All that sort of stuff. Recent weather. Has it been dry? Has it been rainy? Could there be some sort of a runoff element to this or not? That's primarily what they want to know. Condition and behavior of animals and organisms. So if you see fish, are they behaving normally, or are they up at the surface gasping for air due to dissolved oxygen issue? They're going to look for that sort of stuff. And then are plants or other organisms affected? Sometimes it's a little harder to monitor, especially if you're there right as it happens. And a lot of times that's going to be, fairly benign, but just if you do see it, make sure you know. And then obviously take photos, document everything. And that was the wonderful thing about having Science on the Fly down here to do that video. The sad part is they caught it at its worst. We went and fished Brushy Creek upriver, where it's beautiful and the creek is great and the fishing was awesome, catching Guadalupe bass and largemouth bass in really early spring, kind of late winter. And then we went down and saw that, and it was just the brown sludge entering the water at a rate that was just unfathomable. And I mean, it's so bad we didn't even want to get our waders in it. I mean, it was terrible, but we had to because we were filming. But it is that place of just looking at that and going, man, no creek deserves this, no water body deserves that. But those are the things you're going to need to know. What can you do from this side of things? So one, obviously, see something, smell something, say something. Number one. Number two, water conservation. A lot of our strain on infrastructure deals with just sheer quantity of water being received into a plant. The less water that's there, the longer time it can stay in the plant, settling and being treated before it has to get discharged in many cases. If it's a lot of water and they're right up against that limit, they got to get it in and out as fast as they can. So just be aware that water conservation does play a role and can be a very useful thing. I mean, it's just a good thing to do anyway. But whether, keep your shower shorter. I mean, when you don't need to rinse off, do whatever, don't leave the water on when you're brushing your teeth. When you're watering your yard, be very judicious about it, because sometimes you'll get runoff, and that enters systems as well a lot of times with that stormwater capturement as well. So just be very cognizant of things that you can conserve water on. Turning that faucet off, is a good thing. More people equals more power. So if we have people that are concerned about this and report this, and we have more eyes on a waterway than ever before, that means you have more people keeping municipalities and other governing authorities accountable. And so that's one of the reasons that we have the success story that we have on Brushy Creek of water being treated to a higher level and more treatments being in place, tertiary filtration going in where it wasn't actually intended to be built into the new plant prior to that. So something I would mention there is more people equals more power. Make a stink about the stink if you need to. And I'm not an activist. I'm not that type of person that's like, out there with a sign and chaining myself to trees and stuff like that. I just believe that we should do what's right. It's just that simple. And sometimes you have to be heard, and sometimes that means you got to make a little bit of a fuss. But don't be mean about it. And that's the thing. If y'all know me at all, I'm not going to get up and shout in somebody's face and be profane or anything like that and tell them that they're the worst person that ever walked the face of the earth because they're doing this to my home water. It's not that at all. When these situations happen, I tend to be more heartbroken than I am angry. And that's the part that, for me, I want to make sure that people really just drill home the fact that just by being humanity, we've got things that we can steward and that are within our power to do. And so being I would say an advocate versus an activist. I mean, for me, it's like an activist is not a bad situation to be. It's not that at all. But I think that word gets a very negative connotation in many circles. In our case, being an advocate for our waterways and our fish and the other organisms that occupy them, that's what you need to be. And be outspoken about it. It's okay. To have an opinion about you want clean water to recreate in, that's a great opinion. You should have that one. How to stay informed and how to get involved. Obviously, staying in touch with the fly shop's pretty easy. If you ever have questions, we're here to answer it. But getting in front of your city councils, those meetings can be just painfully boring at times. But the thing that I would mention is if they don't know that you have an opinion, then that opinion is never voiced. So, if you see something where there's multiple recurrences of failure, and it's not just a one-off where somebody flipped the wrong switch at the plant or there was a construction error or something like that, failures are going to happen. Regrettably, they will. I mean, it's just a cold, hard fact of life. Minimizing those is what we're after. And it's kind of the good old sign of this many days without an accident, that we want that to be like in perpetuity. In a perfect world, they're never going to happen, but they're very complex systems, and they're prone to failure even with redundancies. It's going to happen, whether it's an act of God through weather or whether it's act of man through somebody didn't do their job right. There's a lot of different moving parts that come into that, but sewage treatment is just a cold hard fact of life. We live in a civilized urban area, and so your waste is going to go somewhere, and something has to be done with it. You can't just leach it out into an open field and hope that it takes care of itself. You think it's bad in a creek, look at it if we did it in the opposite. So I mean, you take some of this with a grain of salt, but one thing I do want you to know is that from this standpoint, doing it, having your cities know that you want this done as good as it can possibly be done, that's something that's so important. And if you see repeated failures, it's worth bringing that forward as an issue, as an open forum discussion before city council. And it was interesting, before an actual city council meeting where they were actually having a meeting to kind of actually vote on certain things and kind of have a formal hearing, they brought myself, a couple of concerned homeowners, and Texas Parks and Wildlife in for that preliminary hearing so that the council could actually wrap their head around what was going on in the creek. That was very good that they were at least trying to do so, and I know that they brought some of their professionals in as well. We all have differing opinions on some of this stuff because, nobody wants to get caught as the perpetrator. But the main thing is this. if they know what's happening to the waterway and we have the capability of fixing it, then let's just join in that common goal and find out how to get there and be a proponent of whatever that outcome is to make it better. And that's the part that I think we all agreed on. And that was where, you know, I still left as friends with a lot of people, you know, that are dealing with wastewater management. I made some great relationships within the city over that, and hopefully not too many enemies. But one of the things of, I don't call any of them enemies personally. It's the point of hopefully they don't think that about me just for being a squeaky wheel. It will get the grease eventually. But Round Rock, we had a good story, a good outcome to this. It was a painful process, but a good ending. And we're going to see the culmination of a lot of that come, I think it's May or June of this year, when we see tertiary filtration enter that whole treatment process, and we're going to see water qualities that we haven't seen before. On the good news side, a lot of the fish population down below the spill area has, it's rebounding. We're seeing juvenile Guadalupe bass, and a lot of them. They are sexually mature at only a year of age, and we're seeing a lot of fish that'll be there to help with that spawn. We're seeing a lot of adults. We're seeing some really great stuff happen as a result. So just be aware that is rebounding and actually still kind of coming into that kind of the resurgence that we were really hoping for. So we're seeing some good things down there. Let me hop over here to comments here. I've got a couple of things, and if anybody has any other questions, please dump those in here. I'm going to have to read these. This is small text on my end. This is from William. He says, as a water well driller who has a water quality technology degree, I totally agree with overbuilding and that those minimums are too high. What I've found up here in Oregon is that what's good for thee is not good for me when you're dealing with how the state will deal with a private company versus a government entity. Fully agree with that. I had an experience about 10 years ago where a customer wanted a well on a 1 acre parcel on the Salmon River on the Coast Range. I called the Division of State Lands and Oregon State Police, asked them how to proceed. I was willing to abide by their rules, yet when I asked them if I could still be fined if a light gray color from the sandstone seeped in the river through the gravel, they said I could be fined $100,000. I did not do the job. Crazy. You know, it's just like, by drilling, if a light color from sediment enters a waterway, $100,000 fine. I'd be impressed if any of those fines are leveled against a municipality or government entity. So I do see that. I don't have all that on factual knowledge. There is some financial penalty at times, but the comment I was given from a lot of TCEQ and from other entities is that they don't like burdening the municipality with a fee because they would rather that fee go towards cleanup and infrastructure, you know, repair or building. And I'm like, really? I'm like, if there's no fine for polluting it, then what's the slap on the wrist and go and do better is usually not enough to make people change their ways. So yeah, William, I agree. That's an absolute bummer. And the thing that's crazy about that is that's in another state entirely. I mean, this is not just a Texas thing. This is happening all throughout America because of the just growth that we're seeing in a lot of our urban areas as well. So let's see here, making sure I don't have anything over here on this bun. Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments? That's the bulk of, I mean, we could quote more metrics and things like that. The main thing that we need to do as anglers, see something, smell something, say something. Know what your water looks like when you fish it. And observe if there are changes. Be aware of the nearest sewage treatment plant on a waterway. Know where that is. That way if you report something ever, you're like, hey, those plants are here, here, and here. It's probably coming from the one closest to me upstream. Be aware of those things. It's not hard to find out. You can look at that on Google Earth and see them plain as day. It's very easy. Big clarifiers. Some of the plants are smaller, but it's still pretty easy to find them. And so just be aware of that. One of the things I will very much commend Round Rock on, while the cataclysmic failure was bad, one of the things that you could look at is they've centered all of that wastewater into a regional plant. And so it's a very, very large plant that treats a lot of water, as opposed to multiple little packet plants all up and down the creek that would be discharging at different places. The good thing about that is that means that if you look at one plant with a big failure versus a lot of plants that are affecting multiple reaches, that if they all fail, and like I said, failure is pretty much inevitable, then you're looking at the potential for failure on a widespread basis is less. And so that is a nice thing about having a regional plant versus little packet plants all the way up and down. We have a few, but not nearly as many as would take to actually process the amount of water that regional plant does. So, very good. What else we have? My favorite spots, and William, you're welcome for thank you so much for joining in here as well. And then I had somebody else, and William, thanks for that story as well. That's really awesome. We have thank you for that information. You're welcome. And then I have my favorite spots here in San Antonio. The San Antonio River and Cibolo Creek are fed by recycled water. And now I know what to do if something is not right. Thank you. Okay, that's the whole purpose of this. And I like both of those waterways. San Antonio River's awesome. I mean, yeah, it's got recycled water. And the other thing is you're going to see the future, in my opinion, of sewage treatment is going to be water reuse. Because if you look at, aquifers, we're draining those. There's too many straws in the aquifer. We're not getting the artesian pressure that we need in a lot of our rivers, especially our western headwaters. You're seeing that Lake Travis, Lake Buchanan, all the Highland Lake system that serves us around here, those lakes are, often at quote unquote near record lows. That's a problem. And the population's not getting smaller. Water reuse is going to absolutely be the future of sewage treatment, and it's going to be expensive. The municipalities are going to have to pay the price to make this happen, because water reuse, we may, instead of putting that back in a creek that's flowing downstream into the ocean, we may have to water reuse and actually throw that back in our reservoirs. But that is going to have to be done. That literally, that type of water is almost drinkable at that point before it goes through an actual, drinking water facility that treats for that. But I mean, that water has to be like the highest grade. If that is done, I mean, right now there is some water reuse that you can do. And I mean, right now they're doing it to where they can water, municipality areas, parks and fields and whatnot. But you're looking at, you can actually treat water to where you can drink it right out of the pipe when it comes out of there. It's been done. And it's just very expensive to do. And so just be aware that I think the further south you get, just because our water is not as clear as like a trout stream in the west, I think a lot of that gets overlooked. And I think a lot of it's just to abide by the maximums and minimums. It's not trying to really make it the best it can be. I think it's to make it good enough. And I think we're about to pass the days of good enough just from population alone. So just a thought there. Any other questions here before we wrap it? So thank y'all for being on here and for listening. I know it's a lot of information, and just making sure that if you see something, say something, and don't. That's the thing. Just be a great ambassador for the angling community. I see a lot of people online that get really irate, and they get out there and start cussing and shouting and yelling and just I don't think volume and profanity have really changed a whole lot of city officials' minds, honestly. And I don't think it's going to change a governmental entity's minds either. I think if you come forth with facts and with stewardship and with the best interest of the environment, which in turn is the best interest of humanity in general, if you come with that in mind and you come to the table and kind of put all your feelings on a back seat just a little bit, they still need to matter, but if you can be diplomatic about it and come, science-based and factually loaded, you've got a lot more voice at the table than I think you would like to, than most people would admit. I mean, and that's the part that I think a lot of people that, they get loud, and it's almost like having to de-escalate a customer service situation. And it's just like, you just want to get them to shut up so that you make them happy, get them out the door. And it's one of those things of like, if I can say, hey, look, this broke, it shouldn't have. Is there anything we can do about this? Yeah, that's what I want to. I like that personally, and that's my personality. I know a lot of people aren't that way. I just tend to think that you have more seats at the table that are going to get heard if you're just not a jerk about it. And now, do I fully admit the fact that, yeah, I can't stand it when people don't take accountability for their own actions? And yeah, that leaves you in a place that you're like, man, you kind of really wish that they would own up a little bit. Sure, but I'm only accountable for my end of the equation. And I want to make sure that I do the right thing by people, by the environment, and by the animals that live in them. And for me, I think obviously the most valuable for me are my fish. I mean, it's awesome to have places to recreate, but you will have to realize that the future of Texas waterways, it looks pretty bleak if we don't do something in terms of water reuse, conservation, and better water treatment moving forward. So this is kind of a community matters update on that. I don't have anything bad that was like, oh my gosh, it's something, the sky is falling. We just need to be more vigilant moving forward. And thank you to those who do call in when you see something. I mean, that report that we got last weekend about Berry Creek, that's huge. That could have been literally #1 report on that instance. And they might have actually kind of prodded the plant into reporting it as well. I don't remember when all the time frames were, but it's close. So just be aware that your report might be the first one. So just make sure you call it in and do those. I'll throw just a close here. I'm going to go ahead and mention those numbers one last time. The TCEQ reporting hotline, which is the one you should call first, 1-800-832-8224. So 1-800-832-8224. And then Texas Parks and Wildlife, the Kills and Spills unit is 512-389-4848. Again, 512-389-4848. Those are the numbers you need to call if anything happens. If you see something, smell something, say something. And let me check for comments one last time and we'll wrap it up here. Let's see. Yeah. William goes, cut waste in the general budgets and the technology for making sewage water so clean that you can drink it is out there. Don't tax more, manage the funds from the taxpayers. Can't disagree with that one. I really can't. We've got it in city budgets. I mean, sorry. I do get a little miffed on this one. If you've been around Round Rock for a while, and you'll see it, they light up the water tower, the LED lights in the winter. They've got these lights that are on it all year long, but they make it all Christmassy in the winter and whatnot. It's like $500,000 worth of LED lights. It's something like that. I think it was like 480,000 or something. I forget what it was. It was something absurd. I'm like, dude, I like the old Christmas lights better anyway. And then can't we put that into like infrastructure for my creek? Or could we put that into like maybe, riparian restoration for anywhere we've built a road? That'd be nice. We can buy a lot of trees with $500,000. Anyway, those are my thoughts. So just one of those things. I mean, like, I have my thoughts and I just laugh a little bit, but nonetheless, every municipality, if we put a priority on the health of our outdoor spaces, I think we would see that funding get allocated differently if our community demanded it. So thank you so much for watching. Very much appreciate it. Y'all have a fabulous rest of your weekend. And if there's any questions or any concerns, by all means, do not hesitate to reach out and contact the shop. You know how to get a hold of us. If you need anything, we're here to get you outfitted. And I know it's going to be cold this next week based on looking at the weather, but I will say this, spring is on the way and white bass are already starting to kind of eke their way up the river a little bit. They're not full on running, but they're trying. And as soon as we have that warm week and week after next, the bass are going to be going nuts too. So thank y'all so much again for all that you do for our fly fishing community, both near and far. And so thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much and take care.